Okay, hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Toasty Thunder, and for my inaugural video, I am going to be going over the top 10 games that I played in 2022. But first, a few rules that I had for myself for making this list. I had to have played it for the first time in 2022. Doesn't necessarily have to have been released in 2022. Secondly, ongoing games that I play, such as World of Warcraft, League of Legends, TFT, stuff of that sort will not be on the list. I just wanted to make it a list of games that I specifically played for the first time in 2022. That being said, let's get started. Starting at number 10, Gundam Evolution. Man, I really wanted to like this game more than I did. I really did. Gundam Evolution is Bandai Namco's Gundam spin on a hero shooter very reminiscent of Overwatch. I will give it that while being an obvious take on the Overwatch formula, it does a great job at feeling completely different. Through different strategies of balance and abilities, Gundam Evolution managed to feel like a different game from Overwatch, and not just someone trying to steal Overwatch's homework. Credit where credit is due. That being said, I have a few major gripes with the game. First being clarity. For Overwatch, all the heroes in the game are incredibly distinct visually, and have distinct sound effects as well as voice lines, all making the characters very just distinct and easy to pick out of a crowd and a lot of chaos going on. You can still pick out very easily who is doing what and what is happening with each of the actions going on the screen. In Gundam, being a bunch of robots that do small beams or just physical bullets for their ammunition as part of their main guns, it can kind of get hard to identify what killed you at times. The second being matchmaking. This could be due to multiple different reasons. This could be due to a small population of players rather than just not a good matchmaking system. But man, in this game when teams are unbalanced, it's just really rough. But on the flip side, when they happen to get a good balanced game, the game is incredibly fun. It feels great with a nice tug of war back and forth. It's really fun when the matchmaking hits, but unfortunately, it just feels like it misses so much more often. And I know this could be said about any team game where lopsided teams make for a bad experience, but it just feels like it happens just unfortunately often in this game. And originally when the game first came out, I know it's been changed now, but it still grinds my gears when it first came out, is that you couldn't test out the mobile suits that you had to pay for to play them. You just had to sit there and either get destroyed by them or watch a YouTube video to try and understand the mobile suits without ever having a chance to play them. But I understand now that it's changed, and that's a much better change for the game in overall terms. Lastly, not even a fault of the game really, just for me personally, I've kind of fallen out of love with the shooter genre. Some are fun here and there, but they don't really scratch the itch for me like they used to. Number 9, Into the Breach. Into the Breach was an interesting experience. It's a roguelike tactical RPG that was really fun, but what made it interesting to me is that there's another tactical roguelike RPG by the name of Otherside that I played just the year prior, and the things that I disliked about Into the Breach, Otherside does really well. And the things that Otherside didn't do well, Into the Breach does great. The pro-con list is almost a one-to-one flip. It's crazy to me. Like a major con for me with Into the Breach is that the boss fights are extremely underwhelming. The way the game works is that you don't even need to kill them, you just need to survive. And I'm all for alternate win conditions, but when it comes to boss battles, I personally like boss battles being a test of your skill in a fight to the death. Otherside does exactly this, and the boss fights are phenomenal set pieces with interesting mechanics and things to consider. Either you win or you lose the run. That's it, and I love that pressure. For something Into the Breach does well, is that you can kind of end a run early, and even if you run run early, you can still unlock big new things for your next run, and it gives you a lot of reason to play the game over and over and complete more stuff and get more stuff for your next run each time. But if you're starting to struggle, you can kind of end your run and move on to something new. While Other Side gives you plenty of reason to see your way through one entire run through the story, but after completing a single run in Other Side, there's not really a ton more to experiment with. It kind of just leaves you hanging, and it's okay, time to shelf it. And I could go on with the kind of similarities between these games. If you guys are curious and would like a more in-depth breakdown of these games, let me know. I would consider going further into kind of breaking these games down a little bit more. But I'm telling you, if you were to take the lessons learned from Other Side and Into the Breach and combine them into one combined Giga game, this game would be one of the best games ever made. No doubt in my mind, if you just took the lessons learned from both games, you'd have damn near a perfect game. Number 8, Roller Drummer. This was an interesting little indie game. Imagine if Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was turned into an action game of some kind. It's kind of a weird concept to think about at first, but it turns out pretty darn well in practice. The game also does a fun and interesting job with with indirect storytelling, and you get to piece out the story kind of before each and every level, because you're a competitor going through these kind of almost Hunger Games style, like performing for the crowd kind of thing, and you get to look in the locker room and pick up notes and news articles that tell you the stories surrounding the game. It's pretty interesting. The maps in the game range from really fun and gives interesting options for kills and tricks and having nice mobility and long range sights for killing with different guns, and some are just kind of frustrating and annoying. For the action and killing part of the game, it gives you a pistol to start, then you get a shotgun, grenade launcher, and a railgun, which is just as fun as it sounds. The game does its shooting aspect, sort of a Doom-style shoot-a-thon. Your weapons are more combat puzzle solvers, rather than just picking your favorite gun and sticking to it. I completed the main story for the game, and I thought that was going to be the bulk of the game. But then, while recording footage for this video, I started doing the kind of extra after-game modes, and I still realized that I might have quite a bit of game to play. It seems the story is more of an introduction to the game, and the next mode is just like a no-holds-bars going through all the maps one more time, except this time it's just started throwing all the enemies that you face throughout the game right at the get-go. Unfortunately, I like the game for the novelty, but I don't think it's a game that I'm looking to dump a ton of hours into. If you're looking for something different, I highly recommend the game. Give it a shot. Pretty sure it's not that expensive too. Number 7. Pokemon Violet. Oh boy, I'll be honest, I'm not sure I can add a ton new to the conversation around this game. If you're online during the time that this game's released, you have undoubtedly seen the wild bugs in this game. This game is just a QA rush job / catastrophe of a game. So many bugs that are just absolutely comical. You also probably heard, underneath all the bugs, that it's a pretty sound Pokemon game. Terrestrializing was cooler than I had originally given it credit for. The open world was pretty fun for the most part. Part of me for the open world kind of wished it would scale around your level, with maybe only the end game areas not scaling down to you. But at the same time, kind of doing the world out of the order was kind of fun. I did the Don Van Titan way before I was supposed to, but I still insisted on trying to beat him before moving on, and it made for a legitimate fun challenge trying to do the content under level. I do feel as though if the world scaled around you, it would make a lot more cohesive sense and kind of just feel better overall, but I kind of would miss the challenge a static world provided around the mid-game. Because while it was fun in the mid-game, once you got through the hard stuff, the in-game stuff that you kind of skip through, then the last portion of the game was just unbelievably boring, just mopping the floor with everything that's left. Maybe in a future game they could keep the Titans around that didn't scale to your levels, so in the future games it would keep interesting options for challenges if you insisted on trying to do it that way. Finally, for the last quarter of the game though, when you go down into the center crater, this was probably one of my favorite Pokemon experiences in recent memory. From the stronger Pokemon to uncovering the mystery of what happened within the crater, and the music that plays as you explore the crater, It invoked a sense of childlike wonder I haven't felt when playing Pokemon in generations. It's truly a remarkable experience. The Center Crater experience makes me want a Pokemon game where you're not starting the same as an upstart trainer, but maybe you're a champion or a professor that's coming out of retirement, or just a professor going around helping different cities and continents with Pokemon-related problems and mysteries. Like, just imagine if you're just a professor that's going to the city that's reported lost children, and you go to the city and you look for clues, and you eventually find out that it's the Drift Bloom living out their Pokedex entries of going to kids and whisking them away, and you have to solve and fight off the Drift Bloom and save the kids. Like, this stuff would be crazy and insane. But, and like, you of course can like challenge the gym, but it's not like the goal of the game. You can be like, more for old time's sake kind of thing. But then again, maybe I'm just part of an audience that enjoys Pokemon that it's not really marketed towards anymore. But, oh well, I digress. But, getting back to Pokemon Violet. Long story short, the people designing the game and mechanics behind the Pokemon games still got it. Still really fun games, but it would be a much better game if the QA and the development team had time to work out the bugs in the game and ship out a fully finished, fully polished product. But just the way the games keep selling like hotcakes, and I can't blame people, one can only hope that they'll be afforded the time they need for the next game. Coming up in number 6, we've got DNF Duel. Man, DNF Duel is so cool. It's just got characters that do crazy things in a 1v1 fighting game that's just like, holy, they can do what now? And it just gets your blood boiling with all the possibilities and thinking of what you can do and the combos you can set up. And it just provides some interesting takes on some very common fighting game mechanics, like meter. It's in every fighting game nowadays to spend on super moves. But in this game, you don't spend super meter necessarily on cinematic attacks, but in DNF Duel you spend them on like just your basic special attacks, and there's no cinematic pauses that get in the way of the gameplay. But they're just absolutely bombastic and just as impactful moves as you would expect from supers that like have the little cinematic attached in kind of any other game. And only do players get a cinematic suitor when they get really low health. They get one singular cinematic move that, of course, all look gorgeous and amazing, and they just do a bunch of damage to help you clinch out a match. It is also the first fighting game that did more of the Smash Bros. Style fighting game directional inputs rather than the quarter circle motions of a traditional fighting game. There's just a ton to look at and analyze with DNF Duel because it's a game that gives characters huge, bombastic offensive options with some universal but very conservative by comparison defensive options. And while I liked it personally, it seemed very divisive online. Overall, the game had a mostly positive reception from what I saw, and a lot of steam behind it at launch, and then the developers just did nothing for a long time. They did some minor balance patches, but there was no announcement of new characters, no expansion, DLC pass, no nothing. And so kind of people jumped off the game. Can't entirely blame them with just heavy hitters of fighting games coming out recently. And it only was until fairly recently, kind of like December-ish, that we finally got an announcement that there was going to be official new DLC characters and a whole DLC kind of expansion pass kind of thing coming out. And while I think it's great for the game, one can only think that maybe it's a little too late. I know I'm interested in hopping back in once the DLC character comes out, but yeah, when I was trying to record footage for this video, or for this game, it took forever to find a match, and when I did find a match, I was just fighting against the same few people every so often. And I was low rank, and I was just looking to press some buttons and have some fun in the game. And it was still fun to play, but just the low population of people and time to get a game was just really unfortunate. But who knows, maybe with the new characters and new DLC that more people flock back to the game. Number 5. For number 5, we've got Chivalry. I think it's Chivalry 2. Hold on. Chivalry 2. Right. Okay. Chivalry 2 was a really fun game. I feel like me and the people who made this game would be really good friends. These people said, what if we took Halo-style big team deathmatches, made them bigger, make them mostly melee? This game feels like Halo at its most chaotic and fun, then telling people to get up close and smack each other with swords. And that just screams games I want to play. And it all comes together and pulls it off incredibly well. Before we get too much into it, one of the goofiest, dumbest things about this game that brought me so much joy for no apparent reason is that you can just go around and pick up and throw pretty much anything you can get your hands on. Your weapons, throw them. Sticks and stones flying around the floor, throw them. Barrels and chairs, throw them. Fish and chickens, throw them. One of my favorite matches was a game where you're defending this oceanside town or whatever, and I just realized that there was a barrel full of fish, and you could pick up the fish in the barrel individually and throw them at your enemies. And to much to my friend's dismay, I spent the rest of the match role-playing as a fish vendor, caught in the crossfire of this attack. I was just hurtling fish at the enemies the whole game, and I'm just crying laughing. It was just hysterical, trying to hit people with a fish. And even it did nothing. It was just absolutely hilarious that I could just throw fish at people. And then another favorite moment was a match where I picked up a chicken and I threw it at this guy and actually hit him with the chicken. And then he proceeded to salute me for this feat of hitting him with the chicken before we completed our duel. And it was just absolutely ridiculous. This game just reminds me of the most chaotic parts of Halo. And it is just absolutely fantastic. But just like Halo being chaotic and ridiculous, when you get down to it, the inner mechanics of the game work just as well as the rest of the game around it. The game has a few different classes with a variety of different weapons, and all the melee weapons function essentially the same. They have 3 different slashing or stabbing attacks, and what kind of makes them different is the length and heft of the weapon drastically change how you approach combat. For example, if you have a bigger weapon, like some of the bigger axes or whatever, your attacks are going to be slower but cover a larger distance. And in this game, you can kind of manipulate the camera to get your characters, even though he takes long to swing, you manipulate the camera and bring the camera around so that where he would be swinging is going to come into your contact with your enemy sooner. You can get your slow hitting weapons to attack faster by manipulating your camera, and it feels really cool trying to do it. And you can get more range out of your wide swings by manipulating the camera, and it really helps with when you're being surrounded in the game. And with this being a big team battle kind of game, you get surrounded a lot. There's stabs that you can use to take advantage of when you and your allies are surrounding an enemy so you don't hit your allies. Oh yeah, friendly fire is always on and is a big part of the game. You can use kicks to get past enemies holding a shield. There's just a lot to going on in the game, and there's definitely an easy to pick up and play but hard to master mentality going on with the game. And while I haven't really put a ton of time in the game myself, I really enjoy the game every time I hop in and play. Oh boy, here we go, getting to the top 4. Number 4 is Cyberpunk 2077. I know a lot of people's impression of this game were tainted from the early launch problems this game had, but I saw these problems, still wanted to play the game, but I waited patiently for all the problems to be fixed. And by the time I got to play, I didn't get harassed by any of the early crazy bugs this game had, and I had a great time with the game. And just like many other people, I really hopped in after watching the anime. It was around this time where me and my friend were digging into the game and we're having a great time. Before we get too deep into talking about Cyberpunk specifically, I just want to bring up the fact that I'm not a huge fan of open world RPGs, kind of like in the vein of the Bethesda, Skyrims, and Fallouts. They're just not my thing, or the way they're executed is in many ways. I find a lot of them they just start out painfully boring, or once you finally get into the open world, sure, you can go anywhere, quotes, but this just zone just to the left of the starting zone has just giant, crazy overlevel enemies. So yeah, explore anywhere else besides the place to your right. But Cyberpunk's start didn't bore me. Had me on the edge of my seat actually. And the open world wasn't immediately over punishing, and it kind of just slowly lets you into the overworld. It felt good that way. And Cyberpunk also has going for it that it is just a very refreshing sci-fi open world kind of thing. And it's not just the dreary Fallouts or the hyper high fantasy kind of open world. This is its own kind of like postmodern sci-fi feel to it. And it's just so much different and very refreshing compared to every other open world game I've played. And it largely helped keep me entertained. And I just wanted to explore every inch of this game. I want to go back, honestly, but I told myself I'm just going to wait for the DLC at this point. Okay, enough with the surface level gushing. Time to be a little bit more critical with more than just the obvious bugs are annoying. The pacing of the story is weird to me. Actually, that's a massive issue I have with open world RPGs in general as well. And I'll start with Cyberpunk in particular. Cyberpunk is a massive game with ton to do, but the main story is like 10, 20 hours tops. You get to a point in the story where it makes pretty clear that this is the last mission in the game. And it just asks like, are you ready? Make sure you're ready. And then it's just as a player, it's like, nope, hold on, let me go do everything else in this game. Hold on, main character in the story, let me go do another 40 hours of content before coming out to help you out and finish the story out. And it's like, gee, thanks, important character, thanks for waiting, let's finish this. There's a few branches of the story and a few important characters you're supposed to do missions with, and I wish they at least gated the main story at least a little behind some of the like other character you're supposed to do the mission around. And it's an open world, you're supposed to do anything however you want, but like the structure of the story feels so weird with the kind of end game just sitting there waiting for you to come talk to it whenever you're ready. I don't know how to fix it yet. I haven't thought too deeply about open world games in that sense, but I guess, okay, scratch that. I'd like to see what an open world game would look like in terms of story performance and how it feels if they use kind of like a timed system that Persona does. With the like, you have a certain number of days to get this story content done, and you have more certain number of days to get this story content done, and then by this day, that's it. You gotta go do the thing. Sure, it might make like you need to use a guide to get everything done, but I wouldn't be too upset if like you could complete everything you wanted and then like fast forward to the important date. I feel like that would feel just ever so slightly better to me than just having this important character sit around and wait for you until you finish the game on your own terms. And also, very annoyingly, having the mission tracker be like, hey, go do the final story mission, constantly bringing it up all the time over on top of the mission that you're actually actively pursuing and trying to do. That was just so annoying. It's like, I get it, just put it away for now. It was really annoying, and the pacing of the story is just weird to me. That being said, all the actual story content was just absolutely engrossing. I think it's some of the best storytelling in video games that I've experienced in a long time. And there have just been some bad storytelling in games lately. Just catastrophic, poor storytelling in my opinion. We are not playing story games for the story in particular right now. Those are few and far between in my opinion. And I am excited to see where the DLC brings the story of this game and kind of what the DLC is going to bring in terms of gameplay of the game as well. I really enjoyed this game, and I'm looking forward to making another trip back to Night City. Number 3 is Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Let's go. It is an absolute miracle that Master Duel finally exists. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, and it took 24 of those 25 years to get an official game where you can play the card game as it's meant to be played with cardboard but online. Holy moly. but it is finally here and it's here to stay. The presentation is fantastic and it makes the complicated game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Much more digestible visually, and it even has quite a bit of solo stuff to do. My biggest complaint originally with the game was that there was a lot of quality of life stuff not present in the game originally, like you couldn't do unranked duels, making rooms were kind of weird. It took them a while, but now here in 2023 we have it finally, but it was an original hit to the game as it was in 2022. Another kind of weird complaint that I originally had about the game was that it's not exactly the card game as it is in Cardboard, because it's got a different ban list compared to the English card game, and it's got a different ban list even to the Japanese card game. Master Duel is kind of this weird beast all on its own, and it took a while in my brain to kind of just reconcile this, that it's just, okay, it's not exactly the Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll play in paper, but it's as close as we've ever had to playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In paper, and I'm so thankful it exists because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just such a fun game, and I love having a simulator, online simulator to play, that I can learn all the weird and wild interactions this game can have online before I take it into physical play. Spoiler alert, the first full video that I do talking about a singular game is going to be Yu-Gi-Oh! And card games in general, and why Yu-Gi-Oh! Is my absolute favorite card game, because there's just so much to talk about with Yu-Gi-Oh! And the relationship with other card games in the card game landscape. Moving on to number 2. This is kind of an upset being a number 2, to be honest, but my number 2, if you know me as a person, I love the Bayonetta series, and Bayonetta 3 is gonna kind of slide in here at number 2 rather than what I would have thought would be my number 1. Let's bring up the first kind of extreme, major, obvious con of the game. The story is so bad, like really bad. Kotaku in particular goes in on how bad the story is, and yeah, they're not really wrong. If you're playing Bayonetta for the story and you're looking forward to how the story kind of concludes in Bayonetta 3, it's not great, not a good look. It's just not good. It's just, I wish I made a tweet about my original bet on the story, because I 100% called every aspect of the story from the very first trailer it was shown. The story is just really simplistic, and it tries to like pull a fast one using some surprising plot twists or something. But they don't work because there's not enough characters involved in the story to pin the blame on anyone else. The story is just really simple, and it just, at the end of the day, it almost feels like a spit in the face of a lot of fans who liked the character of Bayonetta, and it's really weird, it's really odd. But at the end of the day, me personally, I'm not here for the story of Bayonetta. Where this game really shines is in its gameplay. I was thinking to myself, how can I explain the strides this game takes to improve upon its gameplay compared to the past 2 games to someone who has never played the game? And I was kind of thinking of it like this. Bayonetta 1 essentially sets the foundation and builds the house that becomes the iconic fast-paced action gameplay that Bayonetta is known for. Fair enough. Bayonetta 2 essentially just renovates the house. Nintendo brought the game back from the brink of extinction, so it kind of makes sense that they just kind of do some updates, make some changes, make a new fridge, get a new oven, but it doesn't go too crazy. They're just glad the house is still there. And Bayonetta 3 adds 2 new stories to this house, remembers to furnish the whole thing and add new floors, and builds more rooms onto the house to the point where it feels like it was there the whole time. The new combat system is so clearly lovingly crafted and clearly got the time and attention that it needed to shine. Obviously, a core element to any action game is its weapons, and going from Bayo 1 to 2, they were different weapons, but pretty reasonable. Not exactly the same, a lot of different ones, and I even kind of like the weapons in Bayonetta 1 more. In Bayonetta 3 though, all the weapons are so unique and awesome. All of them open different avenues for you to dismantle your enemies, and it's such a joy to see that the weapons aren't at all slouching the fun department this time. From a train chainsaw to a kraken summoning anchor, the weapons are all so cool. And in this game, each of the weapons comes with a demon form that Bayonetta transforms into, and also comes with a full kaiju-sized demon that she can control during the battle. And these additions just drastically change the combat and take it to the absolute astronomically new level. Kind of downside, well, the combat and the things Bayonetta can do were clearly had a lot of time put into them. The new enemies in Bayonetta 3 are just kind of lame, and honestly it's kind of a problem that starts in Bayonetta 2 in my opinion. So I get like Bayonetta 2 is supposed to be this over-the-top crazy witch and she can fight all the things at all the time, and you want to show the player how much you're learning in the game and throwing bosses and enemies at normal combat situations. But when you start to throw enemies that were previous bosses at your player, you kind of take away and you kind of forget where the bosses were originally, and throwing them constantly at your player just kind of makes all the enemies seem kind of really dull and bland and boring, and you kind of forget who was important and which enemies were not important. And really in Bayonetta 2, the only enemy that sticks out like a sore thumb is the final boss, and that's because he's like a human compared to like all the weird angels and demons you're slaying. And in Bayonetta 3, it's almost just even worse. They're just these weird blue blob things. And okay, in Bayonetta 3, it's not strictly worse. Bayonetta 3, the common enemy is really boring. Even worse, comparably bad to Bayonetta 2. Where Bayonetta 3 kind of improves upon Bayonetta 2 is that at least the set pieces and the bosses are extremely memorable, and they all have like a big boss fight with a unique boss, and then a unique almost like mini game thing afterwards that sets it apart, with just like Bayonetta summons even larger demons to fight in these cutscene games that you do with mini games, and it's absolutely crazy. And those are at least extremely memorable and feel really good compared to Bayonetta 2. But it would be nice for the average enemy to have a little more personality and flair. While Bayonetta is not necessarily an open world game, Bayonetta 3 begs you to explore every crack and crevice in the game. If you go off the beaten path, you're bound to find something. From a challenge portal to a health upgrade, there's almost always something to find when you go off the beaten path. And as you keep finding stuff that's off the beaten path and you keep encouraging your player to go off the beaten path, something that was a little unintended, I think, in this game is that with the new demon forms that Bayonetta has access to, all these demon forms have give you access to some new like mobility options and let you traverse great distances in the air. And in the background, like the background design of this game, it's all just like either like half destroyed buildings or like platforms and like stuff in the distance and like cool background stuff. But a lot of the way the backgrounds were set up and the exploration was in this game, you're looking at a platform or something in the background and you're like, huh, I think I can reach that platform in this game. And so I go to try and like jump, transform in a demon form and like dash off into the distance, and then trying to dash off into the distance and the camera disconnects from Bayonetta and she just goes flying off into oblivion because I thought that platform out in the distance might be reachable. And I cannot tell you how many times this actually happened to me just because I was like, huh, I think I might be able to reach it in this game. But nope, that platform actually wasn't intended for you to get to. And I think that's a tiny oversight that you might need a lot of time playing the game to actually pick up, that maybe that's a thing that you could potentially fix. But it's not the biggest gripe, but it was just kind of a funny gripe that I ended up having with the game. But on top of that though, part of the fun of the past Bayonetta games was these challenge portals, which you take to a different zone that leads you to a very specific area, which gives you a very specific combat puzzle, and you have to solve that are like direct challenges from the developers. Because it's not normal combat, you don't get to use items, and even if you press the pause menu and go to your items and it says, this is a challenge from Platinum Games, complete the challenge as follows or something like that. I forget the exact wording, but they are very direct challenges to the player to solve these challenge puzzles, and they were awesome. But Bayonetta 3 though, there's so many of them. They just are everywhere. There's like 4+ in a level or sometimes. And it's just like, that's an exaggeration. There's probably not 4+ in a level, but there's at least 4. And that's a lot. And there's just so many, and it's almost got like disruptive to the actual playing of the game. By the time I got close to the end of the game, I almost didn't want to do them anymore. And they even have like another extra challenge chapters called the Witch Trials. They've had it in the past of old games, and they've had it in the past, or had them at the end of this game as well. There's a ton to do, but if it could be spaced out a little bit better is, I guess, my complaint. But that also leads into another pro to the game, is that there's so much to do in this game. There's just, the music is amazing. The actual set piece fights are a blast. There's an absolute ton of cool, like, silly references to other series. The game isn't perfect, clearly, but the gameplay itself is so lovingly crafted, and there's tons to do, and even emergent gameplay stuff that the community behind the game is starting to find that takes the combat even further. I beat the main story, but there's still just a ton for me to do. Weapons I haven't unlocked, not so secret boss fights to do, and challenges to do. The game is the complete package. There's gonna be no DLC for this game, and it's just so rare how much there is to do in this game with no DLC, no extra money spent in this game, and I could not be happier for just how long I waited for Bayonetta 3, and then the game I finally got. I really can't complain. The game is fantastic, and I will have a game to return to in between any kind of lulls between major releases. I'll have a game to come out back to for years to come, and I couldn't be happier. All that being said, the game that sneaks into my #1 game of 2022 is Naraka Bladepoint. It's hard to not gush about this game, because I just absolutely love it. So there's a concept of flow in game design where you want to have your players fluttering in this zone of challenged but not frustrated, in moments that kind of ease up on the tension but don't leave your players completely bored. And I think battle royales do this amazing. When you're not in combat, you're trying to loot and find the best gear, and you've got inventory management problems to solve, but then the moments of combat strike hard and fast when you're found by another player. I've always liked the concept of battle royales, but they didn't quite click with me. In previous battle royales I've played, the combat swings from frustrating with the fact that I'm terrible at shooters like PUBG, or just not quite tense enough when it comes to kind of like the platforming from Fall Guys. Just not being the kind of gameplay I want to spend mastering. Not that either of these are bad games, they're just not for me. Enter Naraka Bladepoint. It's the multiplayer Ninja Gaiden Devil May Cry Bayonetta game that I never knew I wanted, and it just so happens to be a battle royale. I fell in love with this game so fast. The combat is in your face rather than a shooter, and to even engage in combat, you have to go looking for it. There's enough mini events on the map that inspire players to go towards them and move towards mini rewards, or to get away from them and avoid danger. Something different that I don't think that PUBG or Fortnite exactly have is that each character has a unique skill and ultimate that make it kind of like bring a hero shooter element to it, but not exactly. And you always have something to rely on, even if you can't find the absolute best of equipment. The game prides itself on having some of the best mobility options you'll find in a game, and when you see someone moving who's mastered the game, it just looks absolutely incredibly smooth and just flawless. Kind of the biggest flaw that I can point out with the game currently is that it doesn't have a giant player base. When the lower level games are filled with bots, but there are some easy avenues that developers can make to bring in new players. They can make the game free to play. They already have an extensive and really good cosmetics system and battle pass system set up. So all it would take to turn to free to play is just to turn off the initial paywall. And the initial paywall is like $20 in the first place, so it's not like they're charging full price for the game to begin with. And then they can port the game to PlayStation consoles and open up the player base to a whole new console of players that are getting to the game And if they made it free to play at the same time, it would just a huge influx. The game is actually incredibly popular in China and in Europe, and the NA scene is still currently growing at the moment, with the community, the North American community on Discord just starting to get together weekly tournaments. It feels pretty weird going this in depth about player base being a pro or con of the game, but with a battle royale, it's pretty important. And besides the player base not being that big yet, and sometimes shaky server connections, I honestly don't have much else bad to say about the game right now. The game is incredibly fast paced with equal room for execution mastery and just straight up mind games when playing against your opponents. The weapons all feel unique and have cool combo routes that can be explored, and even have different combo routes depending on the different characters that you're playing and the abilities that you have access to. The meta of strong characters completely changes depending on if you're playing in the singles mode, doubles mode, or trios mode. And they have single player content for people to enjoy with a story mode attached. It's a little too grindy for me, but it's still fun to dive into once in a while, and it's a fun place to interact with other players. A very small point to add at the end here is that the cosmetics that they add to the game are just absolutely fantastic. The latest set of content was all sci-fi themed, and it looks amazing. And with a confirmed crossover with Nier Automata at some point this year, we're bound to get even more cool sci-fi stuff soon. I just absolutely fell in love with this game, the look of the game, the feel of the game, and I'll be absolutely spending more time with this game in 2023. And I'm excited to see how the game unfolds over the course of the next year. Well, that's it. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching my inaugural video. As a student of game design, I'm going to use this channel as a place where I deep dive into some of my favorite games and try to dissect what makes them good and maybe what could be improved on them. And eventually, I want to show off the different projects I'm working on here as well. This is Toasty Thunder, signing out.